Stick around to the end of the video because we've got our Spider holster giveaway. Exciting piece of equipment, don't miss out. Today on the Slanted Lens, we're going to break down a fantasy portrait that we did of Nadia Dawn dressed in Day of the Dead makeup. We'll take a look at the crew that was needed and the camera settings that we used and then the lighting breakdown. Let's get started. When doing a shot like this, we need a good makeup person. Terry Groves of Makeup Magic will be doing all the makeup and hair. Jolene, who's worked on a ton of this stuff with me, is going to do the wardrobe to get the right dress and the right clothing. We're looking for a light dress so it will really stand out against that darker background. I'm going to have one assistant and then one runner. That's pretty much my crew. I have 4 people besides myself. I have a makeup person, a stylist, a first assistant, and a runner. You're going to see more people than that in the video, but that's because we have 2 people on shooting the behind the scenes for the Slanted Lens. We don't need 2 people. We could get away with just 1, but in this case we had 2 and it was really nice. I mean, sometimes if we really get in a bind, they'll kind of help out and do a couple of things, but for the most part, they're shooting the behind the scenes video to show how we created this lesson. Let's look at the location. You know, we had scheduled a great cemetery, and at the last minute they called and said, you know what, you've got to have a permit from this certain state agency, and by the time we would have tracked that down, there's no way, couldn't have got it soon enough. So they canceled on us at the last minute. So it's the night before, we've got to make a decision. We went out the morning of and looked around for another cemetery, couldn't really find anything that was going to work, certainly couldn't find anything that was in our budget. And so at the last minute we said, you know what, let's just go full speed ahead. We're going to go rent headstones from 2 different prop houses. So Jolene went out to Premier Props and Green Set, took pictures of headstones, texted those back to me. I sent guys to pick them up, and within 2 or 3 hours we had a graveyard in our backyard. I decided to put the camera under the trees way in the edge of the property, and so we could look back towards the headstones and have that overhanging trees to kind of frame our talent in the foreground. I think it's going to be an interesting setup. We placed a Rosco 1900 smoker to camera right and just let that drift across the headstones and up into the trees. Looked very effective. In the foreground, we set up our Rosco 1700 smoke machine and ran it through our cool box to create the smoke that's laying on the ground. You can go to our lesson called Creating Smoke to see exactly how we created this cool box effect. 2 sources of smoke make it really hard to keep things under control. It also changes our exposure because the more dense the smoke is, actually the brighter the background becomes. The less dense the smoke is, the darker the background becomes, because light has to have something to reflect off from. So if there's no smoke in the air, it doesn't reflect on anything, the background becomes darker. The light reflects off from that smoke and makes a much brighter background. So we're going to talk about how to deal with that issue. I set my ISO at 320 and I set my shutter speed at 1/30 of a second. I experimented with different shutter speeds to try to burn the candles in the shot. I wanted them to be fairly bright, but I wasn't looking for them to light my set or my people by any means. I just wanted to see the flame. My aperture ended up being at 5.6 because that gave me a good exposure on the flame and I could balance my strobes with that on my talent in the foreground. So again, I chose this because I wanted a slow shutter and a wide open aperture to give exposure to the candles. I also wanted a shallower depth of field so that the background becomes a little deeper and doesn't feel completely in focus. Before we break down the lighting, let's take a look at the makeup in fast motion. Terry did a great job on Nadia. It took them about 3 hours for hair and makeup, so that's really something you've got to plan for. It's really not an easy process. Here's the makeup from beginning to end, and that's how you do a Day in the Dead face. Alright, let's go on now and look at our lighting. For the key light, we're going to use a Triton strobe by Photoflex with an extra small octadome. We put our small octadome grid on it to narrow the beam down a little bit. So the grid's bigger than our extra small octadome, but we gathered it together on the bottom and just A-clamped it to the stand. It works out pretty well. We literally shot all night on one of these lithium batteries at different settings. We shot 650 images and the battery was still on half level. We didn't shoot at full power, but most everything was at 3/4 power or half power, which means we really drew a lot of juice off this battery. I then used an LED behind the camera as a slight fill and a good way to see what's going on the set after it gets dark. I'm dragging my shutter so it gives me just a slight fill on the headstones and on her dress in the foreground. I then added another Triton from camera right with a blue gel as a rim on her hair and her body. It picks up some of the smoke. As the smoke fills into the foreground, that'll also open up the foreground. We then added a dynamite head in the background with a full blue on it. It's going to backlight the smoke and rim the headstones. Now on the camera left side, we added a dynamite head with full blue. It's up high, so it's aimed at the trees. It's going to create a cool look as the light streaks through the smoke and is blocked by the branches of the tree. You know, we're ready to shoot. Smoke is really unpredictable though. Let's talk about this process. I like to run the smoke. You fan it like crazy as it comes out with either a reflector or a piece of foam core so that the smoke is broken up and becomes a little less dense. And then I just look until it looks like the right amount of smoke, and then I start to shoot. So you start to get a feel about the timing. That way you can get the exposure to be about the same each time you shoot, because if you don't, you're going to be overexposed, underexposed, it's going to go all over the place. So learn to look for the smoke about where you like it, and get your settings to match that smoke density, and then shoot away. I think our graveyard worked out really quite well. So there's a quick look at how we work on doing a fantasy portrait. I was going to say simple fantasy portrait, but it's not. It's a pretty complicated setup. So keep those cameras rolling, keep on clicking. So Spider Holster is giving away 3 of their Spider Holster rigs. It includes a Spider Monkey, which is a great piece of equipment. You attach it to whatever small equipment you want to put on your belt, and it makes it very accessible. You can just pull it up and use it. Very nice piece of equipment. So this is an entire Spider Holster rig with a Spider Monkey. So there's 3 of those we're giving away. Don't miss out. Click on the link below. It'll take you to the Slanted Lens webpage where you can sign up for that Spider Holster rig. Only 2 people signed up for the Spider Holster rig, so don't miss out. We're giving away 3 of them. Actually, there's been more than 2 people. Thank you. Subscribe to Slanted Lens. Lots of exciting things like this to come.